Oh, hello there, good to see you. I just put this together, so let's see how this SLX 7100 performs over this 12-speed 1150 VG Sports Wonder from China. Let's run through the gears and see what happens. Okay, now let's go down the block. Okay, this is interesting. Alright, so now of course you should ask, why am I bothering you with this, because that's not the title of this video, but you see there's a reason for this. And the reason is that I'm using 12-speed shifter from SRide, well, to make it happen. And thus this is a great intermission to the fabulous adventures of me, LTwoo AX, SRide m500c, and the summary thereof. But first I need to install this AX to this bike, because that's going to be its resting place. And of course it's going to be fed by the SRide shifter, and now you should start suspecting why am I bunching the review of these two together. Alright, so I have it mounted, as you can see. This is the LTwoo AX. It is fed from the SRide shifter, and pay attention how it performs, because it's interesting, especially in the light of what you saw with the SLX. I really need to replace the rotor, it's so bent I can't adjust the brake. Anyhow, as you managed to notice just now, the AX doesn't have this hanging onto the biggest cogs the SLX had, which kinda puts me in a really uncomfortable position and shakes the foundations of my religion, because it makes it seem that this performs better than this. And my only explanation is that Shimano relies too much on its arrangement of shift gates on the HG Plus, on their implementation of the cassette, which means that they're not really performing very well with the Chinese Wonders. And of course, before you say something about a shifter isn't compatible with the derailleur, the same issue happened when I was using an XT 12-speed shifter. So there you go. Now, let's do some talking, less, well, wrenching. So what precisely was I doing for the last 2 weeks? Well, as I was finishing testing the sensor, you know that I broke the chain, and in order to repair the chain I had to shorten it. So my original plan of testing everything with this 38 tooth chainring simply wasn't happening. I had to compensate, and I used this 36 homegrown chainring, which is round, but that's not really relevant. No, because the sensor was dropping chains all of the time, I also used this narrow wide bush guard, which essentially creates much more secure system, and that more or less fixed the issue with the sensor. Now, because the SRide has a clutch, when during the testing of this derailleur I have taken this off to have somewhat comparable, well, conditions of the entire test. Now when riding with the LTwoo, I put this back on because, well, I know it has no clutch, so I don't want to dropping chains all the time. The test equipment was this Canyon over there with a VG Sports 11-50 cassette and a KMC X12 chain, and the chainring you already saw. So let's talk about shifting. Now, after the catastrophe that was the sensor, when I installed the SRide, which was the first one I tested, I noticed that it shifts brilliantly. And by brilliantly I mean it shifted better than Shimano did over the VG Sports cassette, which was kind of surprising. After riding it for quite some time, I noticed that it has a very similar feeling to the SRAM derailleurs or SRAM system, And because I knew from the initial impressions video that it might be compatible with the LTwoo, I did the, well, obvious thing, which is I installed the LTwoo derailleur instead of the SRide, but kept the SRide shifter, and it also worked brilliantly. So then, in order to confirm, I also installed the SRide shifter. No, I installed the LTwoo shifter with the LTwoo derailleur. That obviously worked brilliantly. And then, in order to check for the last one time, I installed the SRide shifter with the LTwoo derailleur. Essentially, I cross-checked compatibility with all equipment I had, and it worked pretty well. So, in order to check the one last thing, which is the compatibility with Shimano, I also tested with a Dior RDM 6000. Essentially, not only it proved to work brilliantly, but also proved to be cross-compatible with both Shimano and with each other. So that's a huge plus. So what about chain retention? Now, bearing in mind that I used a different setup with this bar card here, the chain retention of both systems was fair. Now, I managed to drop a chain once on the SRide when I quite aggressively rode from a pack of stairs, but that wasn't really normal. But nonetheless, you can imagine that having a clutch and dropping a chain isn't precisely the best of things to experience. Now, when it comes to the LTwoo, I managed to drop a chain twice, I think. Not really much of a problem. It wasn't as dramatic as it was with the Sensa, so I have to say that it's not brilliant, it's not perfect, but it works most of the time, so I guess it's a pass. However, when it comes to chain retention, now there is a problem that both derailleurs struggled with something, which is the cassette weight, which I alluded previously. Now, on every full suspension bike, as the suspension compresses, the length of the chainstay obviously grows. This is more or less proportional to the suspension travel, not linearly, not really important at this point. Point being, however, that Canyon over there is a particular kind of bike because it has a very long suspension travel, 180 millimeters, so every problem caused by chainstay growth is going to be exacerbated on it. And it was. As the suspension compresses, in order to compensate for the chainstay growth, the chain is going to violently pull the cassette and cause it to spin really fast. The only force that stops this is obviously the clutch and the spring of the derailleur. Now, during this process, the chain is going to get slackened because after the compression ends, the suspension is going to straighten itself, obviously causing the slack chain, and the faster the derailleur is going to handle this, the better, because we don't want to have a chain slack, because slack chain obviously means danger of a chain drop or bad things happening. The issue here is that both derailleurs struggled with this, but the LTwoo struggled more because it has no clutch. How it would show, it would be most noticeable on the higher gears, but if I would use quite a bit of suspension, then you could feel that the cassette spins itself, the derailleur gets slackened, and it takes quite a long time to return to its resting position, so tensioned position. Wasn't really impressed, and after I switched to the setup, you probably don't see, but that's a 1132 cassette and a very short cage. I was really astonished that I don't have this, because I was so used to it, and because each of the derailleurs I was using was causing that to some extent. But the clutch of the SRide handled this fairly well, but it was noticeable, it wasn't perfect, and the LTwoo was dramatically bad. Obviously, the Canyon here exacerbated the problem because of the suspension travel, but it's going to be noticeable on just about every drivetrain out there. Obviously, on a hardtail, less so than on a full suspension. But I have to note that both derailleurs struggled with this, LTwoo struggled more. And when it comes to it, it was so bad that if you would ride on a very chattery terrain, or quite a few high-frequency low bumps, which would cause this suspension to repeatedly compress and straighten, on the higher gears, the LTwoo would struggle to keep the chain on the cog of the cassette. It was supposed to. You would get this random gear changes, or you would get the completely disengaged chain, and it make pedaling essentially impossible. I noticed that when I was hitting 30 kilometers per hour on a quite chattery terrain. It was a single track through the woods. Well, it wasn't really pleasant experience. Wouldn't recommend. Build quality. Generally speaking, it is fair, but both systems show that they are, well, lower quality or budget quality derailleurs, something that is kind of Alivio-ish or something like that. It's not great. It's functional, and this one, the SRide, is very light because it's just 260 grams, but it wasn't phenomenal. It wasn't something that would, well, make it stand out. You get what you pay for, essentially. And there is one thing that both derailleurs suffered from that the Shimano doesn't suffer, which is the main pivot here. Oh, this one works somewhat like this. And both derailleurs, or even the Sensa I reviewed previously, suffer from this issue. And this issue is caused by, well, sloppy copying of what Shimano and SRide do, because the Shimano SLX 7100 I have doesn't have this problem. So this doesn't seem to impact performance of both this one and the SRide, but it doesn't really inspire confidence. This shouldn't happen. This by design. When you tighten this bolt, every play here should be simply taken out. As I said, this doesn't really impact performance, but obviously it's kind of an issue. It shows you the quality of what you're buying here. So, what is the reason why I'm actually reviewing them together instead of making a video for each one of those? Because I would be repeating myself. They performed almost identically, barring the mind that SRide has a clutch, and because they are cross-compatible with each other, I can't really, I think I can't really make them into separate products. They are, well, exchangeable, and you can pick and choose what you want. Now, I really like the fact that they are also compatible with Shimano 12-speed and supposedly with SRAM Eagle. So, you have more options. For example, you want budget derailleur for some project of yours, and you already have a shifter, you can buy one of these. So what's my final opinion of all of these? Well, for $55 to $60 for a set, you get what you pay for, at least when it comes to build quality. It's fair, it's functional, it's just not great. But bearing in mind that superficially best quality stuff, the Sensa will prove to be the worst of the lot, I wouldn't pay much attention to it. And bear in mind that the SRide was the lightest of them all and performed, well, brilliantly. Most of the time, at least. Now, because of the cross-compatibility, you get to pick and choose which shifter and which derailleur you want, which is a plus. And with a few caveats, I guess I can recommend, well, at least if you're not riding or expecting some sort of blingage out of it. So what are the caveats? First of all, I wouldn't recommend them for long suspension bikes because of the chain retention problems, and if you are interested in any of those, choose the one with the clutch and get some sort of chain device, because it's not going to work perfectly. But it's going to perform, so there's that. Now, the LTwoo obviously offers you lighter shifting because it has no clutch, and you get lighter shifting at the cost of less chain retention. And that's about it. It works more or less correctly. I have no dramatic thoughts about this, so yeah, I would recommend. What about me then? Well, the SRide derailleur and the LTwoo AX shifter are going to wait until I get some sort of use for them. I don't know when that's going to happen, but it's going to happen sooner or later, I guess. No, I don't guess, I'm certain. The SRide shifter with the indicator and the LTwoo derailleur are going to be used by my wife, because that's essentially why I bought them in the first place. And considering that she likes to have an indicator and she likes to, well, her bike just to work, and she isn't really an aggressive rider, the lack of clutch isn't a problem, and it even is a feature because it's going to simply work better. Now the Sensa, we're not going to talk about the Sensa. And I guess this is everything I have to say about the subject. I hope you found this video entertaining. Consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. Like this video if you haven't already. Well, leave a comment if you haven't already. I really can't do this shilling properly. I need to pre-record something. Anyhow, I hope to see you in the next video.